This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets. The OPEC Plus Joint Technical Committee, JTC, expects the oil market to remain in a 0.9 million barrel per day, BPD, deficit this year, but hit a surplus of 2.5 million barrels of oil per day in 2022 as the group raises production, a presentation seen by Reuters showed. The JTC, under a base case scenario, expects global oil demand to grow by 5.95 million barrels of oil per day this year, in line with its previous forecast, and by 3.28 million barrels of oil per day next year. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and allies led by Russia, collectively known as OPEC Plus, meet on Wednesday at 1500 GMT to set policy.
The Biden administration on Tuesday unveiled land parcels it may auction to oil and gas drillers early next year as it seeks to comply with a federal court order directing the government to resume its leasing program. The U.S. Interior Department said it was evaluating parcels in states including Montana, New Mexico, Mississippi, Alabama and Oklahoma, according to documents posted on a government website.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Oil fell on Tuesday on expectations for demand to fall after Hurricane Ida shuttered refiners on the U.S. Gulf Coast, and as producing nations in OPEC Plus geared up to meet on Wednesday with the United States calling for suppliers to pump more crude. Brent crude futures for October, due to expire on Tuesday, fell 39 cents, or 0.5%, to $73.02 a barrel by 11:08 a.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, 15:08 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate, WTI, crude futures were down 43 cents, or 0.6%, at $68.78. Both benchmarks were on track for their first monthly loss since March but were still not far from their July highs, when Brent rose to its strongest since 2018 and U.S. crude since 2014.
Climate change has surfaced as a key issue for Norwegian voters in a September 12-13 parliamentary election, and none more so than in the country's oil industry capital, Stavanger, which is preparing for a low-carbon future. Norway emitted about 13.3 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2020 from fossil fuel production, but emissions from its oil and gas used abroad were 30 times higher at more than 400 million tons, said Robbie Andrew, a senior researcher at Oslo-based climate think tank Cicero. Western Europe's top petroleum producer is facing pressure from environmental groups to stop all new oil and gas projects to help keep climate change in check.
Next, we have the top news in metal markets.
The London Metal Exchange, LME, on Tuesday announced a register to digitally store the sustainability credentials and other characteristics of metals trading on its platform, beginning with energy-intensive aluminium. The register, known as the LME Passport, will transfer certificates of analysis, or quality assurance documents based on a metal's size, shape, purity and other characteristics, from the traditional paper method to a digital system. It will also allow users to disclose information on environmental, social and governance, ESG, credentials, including carbon footprint, water use and social impact. The China Non-Ferrous Metals Industry Association, CNIA, held a meeting of the country's top aluminium smelters on Monday to address what it described as an irrational surge in aluminium prices, which hit a 13-year high in Shanghai. Aluminium on the Shanghai Futures Exchange touched 21,550 yuan, $3,332, a ton on Monday, the highest since August 2008, as production curbs in key Chinese smelting regions, often aimed at easing the strain on the power grid, spark fears of tight supply. Benchmark aluminium prices on the London Metal Exchange notched a 10-year peak on Tuesday.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural sector.
Chicago Board of Trade grain and soybean futures slumped to their lowest prices in weeks on Tuesday as damage to U.S. export facilities from Hurricane Ida stoked concerns among traders. Uncertainty over the length of disruptions to shipments from the Gulf Coast, which accounts for about 60% of U.S. exports, rattled the markets at a time when global grain supplies are tight and demand from China is strong, analysts said. In Louisiana, Ida damaged a Cargill Inc. grain export elevator while rival shipper CHS Inc. warned a facility may lack power for weeks.
That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.